Welcome back to my studio. This is part two in our series of how you know when a painting is finished. The last time I talked about in generalities about what are the basic things that I look at when I'm deciding if a painting is finished. And it was basically I look for things that need to be corrected. I look for things that just bug me more compositionally that I need to fix. And I look at, is there anything I know reasonably, certainly is going to make that painting better if I do it? So what I'm going to do in this part is we're actually going to, with this painting specifically, list the things that I know that are going to make this better. And so that'll give you an idea of how I take those generalities and narrow it down to specifics. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I know I need to address is the actual sun itself. I've zoomed in here. You can see that it's fairly crudely represented. It's not really softly feathered out away from the sun. And some of these other areas, like in the green foliage, that needs to be, again, refined a little. And even the yellow on those leaves that are just under the sun, that needs to be a much brighter, intenser yellow as it gets close to the sun. So that's the first thing that I need to do. And I know that by doing that, it's going to make it better. The light on the pine trees is actually pretty good. I don't know if I'm going to have to do anything to that, but the answer to that will kind of speak to me once I've resolved that whole area around the sun and the light going up into the trees near it. So that's the number one thing to do. The second thing that I need to address is the whole question of whether or not I need any more birch trees, and if so, how many. In particular on the right side of the tree where this painting seems, it's a little bit on the dark side. So one way that I can increase that is by putting another birch tree in here. And I'm thinking that just to the right of that birch that's there, that tree that starts to peek out from behind the other one, that could be a birch. So that's kind of something that I'm going to work on. Again, I'll do that one birch tree in there, and then I'll assess whether it needs any more. We also, the same issue really applies in on the left side of the painting. And we'll just kind of zoom over here. Whoops, and let's zoom out a bit. Again, that whole question of how many birch trees do we need, and do we have enough, or could we use more? And again, enough is the word that I'm really concerned with here. And it's enough to kind of unify the piece. And it's more of a feeling than anything else. But I kind of look at it, it's like, it might be enough now, we might need one more. So that's kind of a thing that needs to be addressed. And actually, still while we're over here, if we zoom in on these trees, you can see that they're still pretty much just blocked in with like a solid black. And we don't have any of the light effect on them. So that sun that's to the right, it's going to have an impact on these trees. That the trees that are facing, the side that's facing towards the sun is actually going to be lighter and warmer, and the side that's away from the tree is going to be cooler. And again, the question of how much of this effect do I need to put in there? Well, enough. You can do too much. Because one of the things that actually is attractive about this painting at this stage, if we kind of zoom back, is that sort of that patterned effect and that silhouette effect of these dark trees against the light sky. If I go and lighten these trees too much, then I'm going to lose that, and that might in fact be overall detrimental to the painting. That means the overall impact will be lessened. So it's kind of enough that it kind of makes sense. But not so much that it really detracts from that stark dark light pattern of the trees. So that's something that needs to be addressed all the way through the painting. And if we just go down a little lower and we look at the ground clutter here, that also needs to be addressed. Because if you look between the leaf shapes here, what we have still is just the basic tone-in shape, which is of a purple over top of an alizarin crimson. So there's this kind of dark crimson tone there that's the same all the way through the entire bottom of the painting. I know from experience that it will look better if I interject some variety in there, put some other colors in there. So they're going to be, there will be some of that crimson showing through, but there'll also be some dark darks, there'll be some purples, there'll be some blues, there'll be some reds, and all of that too is just going to add to that feeling of finish for the piece. Now if we move over to the right side of the big pine trees, you can see in these dark areas of the foliage that's kind of roughly kind of indicated in there. Some of these areas, for me personally, they just seem a little too dark. And so what I plan on doing is coming in and adding a little bit more light and color, more like we see. Let's just zoom in on this one area here. So like that area there of where we see the greens and the purples and the blues I like, but if we move up above certain areas it's very flat and almost just black. So I'm going to put a little bit of color in there, and again, how much? Enough. So this is going to be one of those things where I'm going to approach with baby steps. I'm not going to take a bright green in my brush and go and do 30 strokes and then see how that looks. When I'm doing that type of thing, that's very much applying one stroke of color at a time and assessing it. If I don't like it, I can wipe it off and maybe mix another color that's a little more appropriate. Or again, I can't do one stroke of color too many or too few, but 10 strokes might be the kiss of death. So it's kind of slowing down the process, making a mark, and then assessing it. One more thing that I just know from experience, it's really going to help the painting, is all of these birch trees, and I'm going to zoom in here on the birch tree. Okay, they've been roughed in with their basic values, but I know that if I apply a thin highlight, like a rim light to the sun side of the birch, in a bright, intense, almost a white, but with a bit of a yellowish tinge to it from the sun, that's really going to make that birch tree pop and give it that feeling of the light of the sun on it. And the same thing to a lesser degree on the shade side of the tree in a light blue. And I'll do that with a very fine rigger brush. And again, that's just something I know from experience that is going to generally make the painting have more wow factor. And once I'm done that, I'm just looking at my list here. That's probably all of the basic things that I think I need to address. And again, each of these I will kind of reassess as I go along. And then the very last thing that I'll do is I'll go in and I'll add dots of color. And this for me is very much just about unifying the painting. So for example, if we look let's look up in the top left where we see a little bit of that going on. In the foliage here, you can see some of the strokes where there's a stroke of orange, a stroke of yellow, there's a blue, there's a violet, whatever. Once I've finished all of those other things that I've talked about, then I'm going to just look at the unity of the painting. And does everything look like it belongs? Or does an area look like it could use a little bit more of one of the other colors that appears in the painting to unify it? And because of the way that I paint in this kind of, almost like an enlarged pointillism type thing with the brush strokes showing clearly, if I want to add more red in a certain area or more violet, all I need to do is just look for areas of dark and just put little brush strokes of that color in there. They're not anything, it's just suggestive of that whole kind of speckled aspect of the foliage being seen with the sky kind of shining through it. But that last step is a big thing for me, and that's what really brings the whole painting together, unifies it. And I also look at that stage for about creating pathways for the eye. So maybe I'll need a few strokes of color somewhere to kind of encourage the eye to move along a pathway that I've created. So those are all of the things that I've identified. And as we continue on in this series, we'll look at each one as I resolve it and work on it and look at the difference and see how, hopefully you'll agree with me that each of those things is bringing the painting a little bit closer to its ultimate potential.
Well, thanks for joining me. I hope you found this information helpful. If you did, please subscribe to my channel. I also appreciate the likes and the comments. If there's anything that you'd like me to cover that I haven't, please give me comments. I'll take that into consideration, and look forward to seeing you next time. That's it for now. I'm Tim Packer. Bye-bye.